Good morning. So, as Brad said, I'm Lynsey. I've been with the department at Augusta University for about 5 years now. And if you had told me back in school that I was going to be designing games as a medical illustrator, I probably would have said no way. As I went through the program, the importance of the story and accuracy and medical illustration to me, and then learning about interactivity and game design was kind of supplementary. So then, as I went on, I never thought in a million years that I would be a game designer as part of being also a medical illustrator. So our department at Augusta University, we focus on learning and innovation. So these are some of the things and services that we provide. We create mobile and web apps, iBooks, interactive PDFs, graphic design, animation, 3D, 2D, videography, and then obviously the game design. So it's one small part of a large team of what we do. So this is our team currently. Jeff Mastromonaco on the very end, who is our director, and then Ashley was a former instructional designer. Our two developers are Jennifer and Timmy, and they have like a focus of different areas. So Timmy would be more specific to Android, as well as who I would work with in Unity. And then Jennifer is primarily our iOS developer. And then Tim, obviously, is our multimedia specialist. So he does a lot of our videos, the things that if you open up our app and you see a whole bunch of clinical videos, he would be the one working on those. So what is Gamesalad? Well, is it a salad made up of delicious ingredients for games? No, it's a gaming engine. And when I first started in the department, I think within 2 months, we had the Children's Hospital of Georgia come up to us and say, we have a problem. We have a children's allergy clinic, and the kids, when they go in for their appointment, they get their test on their back, and it's a pinprick of all the allergens. And so as a response to that, obviously, it's itchy. So they kept scratching and scratching it, and then the nurses would come back into the room to check, and that would ruin the results, and they'd have to come back, and they'd have to do it all over again. So they wanted a way to keep the children's hands busy. And we had found out that they had just been granted a whole bunch of iPads. So we had determined that maybe a game would be a good solution with some educational content in it. And that is how we started developing games. So the first game that we started was since it was for the allergy clinic, they were all allergen-based. I've got 2 to show you, and we can come back to that in a second. So Gamesalad itself, though, I'm going to show you a video. This is their brief commercial as like a good intro.
Have you ever wanted to make a game but didn't know where to start? Gamesalad lets you easily create games without ever writing a single line of code. The only thing that's limited is your imagination. With its easy-to-use drag-and-drop user interface, just import your graphics, assign behaviors to them, and you're good to go. Putting your game out there might sound difficult, but with Gamesalad, it's never been easier. You can publish your games for iPhone, iPad, Mac, Android, Nook, Kindle, and even HTML5 so you can put your game on the web, all at the click of a button. When you use Gamesalad, you're well on your way to making a top-rated game for well over 1 billion players. Welcome to Gamesalad.
Could you guys hear that okay? Okay. So it's obviously a little bit similar to the presentation that we had just seen from the department here, where a little bit like, I think it's called Tumult Hype. Let's get rid of this. Background music. Except that for Gamesalad, you don't have to know any coding whatsoever. It's all, it can be all visually based. So I think of it in terms of, if you think of Maya and Cinema 4D, I feel like Cinema 4D is a little bit more visually friendly, their interface, and it kind of lends itself to us as medical illustrators to use, whereas Maya can be very code heavy, or it can be very technological. So I feel like Gamesalad is the more user-friendly version of maybe something like Hype. And so then these are typically the questions that I get the most. How much does it cost, obviously? So for one seat for a year, it is $150 for the educational discount. Copyrights, they have an online store for Gamesalad, so when you publish your app, you can actually publish it into what they call their online arcade. And you retain anything that you make in Gamesalad. They do not have the rights. That's one of the biggest perks about this publishing platform, I feel, is that it's all your copyrights or your copyrights. And then obviously, when you make one project file, you can publish it to anything. So if I wanted to make this virtual tooth app, I can publish it to iOS, I can also publish it to Android, and I can also make an HTML5 widget. So some of the examples that we have done in the department are a few apps that I'm going to show you the quick commercials for these. This is that first allergen game that I was describing earlier, called Epidermis. And oh, this one has sound. So if any of you guys are familiar with, I think it's Invaders, Alien Invaders, the original arcade game, that is literally what this is based off of. So Gamesalad comes with predetermined templates, and that was one of them. And so we had never done this before. And so we took two templates, the other game being Allergen Alert, which is more like Mario. And two of us set aside, and we went ahead and we started plugging in visual graphics, like how could we tie this back into the allergy clinic? So all of the allergens that you see, half of them are mine. So peanuts, ragweed, pollen. So we kind of made it a lot of fun, while the kids could get, kids would have some knowledge as well in between levels, getting some facts, some tidbits, anything that we could throw in educational as well as having fun. So this one is a more recent one. This is Pearly White, and this was for the dental college of over at AU with us. And so they saw we had won a silver award for a virtual pet with diabetes. And if you remember Tamagotchis, it's kind of along those lines. So Pearl is kind of the same concept, but for the dental college. They wanted to teach better, healthy ways for brushing and ways that they felt were not conveyed just by having a one-on-one conversation. So we made an interactive virtual pet.
Hey kids, what's the matter? Is studying proper dental care too boring? Just too boring? Be bored no more. Presenting Pearl E. White, your virtual tooth.
My bad.
Pearl E. White, making dental care fun, not boring.
And then some other examples that are not necessarily game related would be, so we had an iBook series and we wanted some custom content to build within there, so we made some custom widgets. And this one is called Extremities Alive for the physical therapy department. And so below, I have an example of the HTML5 custom widget that was built. You can do this in many different ways, one being through Gamesalad, and then the other being you could, if you actually know any programming or coding. So how many of you guys actually know coding? Okay, so a few. But with Gamesalad, you don't have to know any coding. So that's kind of like the perk for our department, was that a whole bunch of us could collaborate on these projects and all work on it together, and you not necessarily have to have coding skills. So this was a very recent project that we had done for World Health Day, and it was Dr. Kamenstein had come up with the idea that there's this epidemic outbreak, and he wanted to have all of the med school students in a certain year break up into groups of 13, and they were all given an organization that they represented. And so they were given cards that represented money, power, and will. And so each one had a value, and they would, as this session started, the disease on the map, the interactive map, would start to outbreak. And then based on getting with the other groups and kind of collaborating with other organizations, they would have to trade. And so as they would put things on the map, that would affect the outbreak. So it was a really interesting use of Gamesalad in this aspect, but also to watch kind of like the psychology of the whole event unfold. So this is just kind of an example of, as we were there watching the event happen, you can see they're dragging little pins that will represent some sort of what they're building maybe to help defeat this outbreak in this made-up country. And then they have a timer. So as the timer gets closer and closer and closer, you could kind of see the tension in the room building and building and building. So as medical illustrators, how can we use Gamesalad? And so I'm always talking about thinking outside the box, coming up with creative solutions to problems that we have every day. So I have put together this website for you guys. If you want to visit it at all, you can come back and visit these videos. We won't sit here and watch all of them because some of them are very long demos. But some ideas that you can use Gamesalad for are iBook widgets. You can custom create those, and you don't have to know code for it. 2D animation, and then we can do fake 3D. So it's using the 3D rotation images, kind of like Object2Q VR does, except you can add interactivity, and it's a little bit more advanced with like the touch motions and specific to the devices that you're using for each time you create a project. So the iBook widget we had seen here is a slider widget. And that's just, it reveals anatomy underneath inside the book. And this is a custom widget made with Gamesalad. And so these files are here and available if you guys want to look into it further. And I'm more than happy to share any of these project files if anybody wants to try these. The next one is frame-by-frame animation. So Gamesalad has, their image elements are considered, they call them actors. And where you place them in the actual screen, that's the stage. So I think it was similar to one of the programs that you guys were using. So in Gamesalad, you take those same frames that you would render out for a 3D animation, or if you have an illustration that you've have multiple images for and you want to do a fade effect, this would be a way to do that. So here we've just taken a pair of 3D lungs just for purposes of a demo and are rendering it out in a rotation. And so you can see all of my rendered frames there in my folder. So I'm going to go into Gamesalad. I'm going to name my project file, and you can see I have selected, I think it's iPhone landscape. So those are plenty of options. That's actually grown. This is actually a 2-year-old or a year-old video. So that list of available options and devices has actually improved and grown. So here you've got your stage, you have your behaviors, is what they call the actions on the left, and then you've got your library. and I'm going to select all of my images that I rendered out in Cinema 4D for my rotation of my lungs. And I'm going to drag it up here, and this is going to become my actor. So this was actually for, I think it was a game in cystic fibrosis, maybe, is what we were focusing on. And so we had a glowing pair of lungs handy. And so now I'm taking what they call the behaviors, or the actions, is like how we would think of it, and I can drag those easily into my actor. So any of those behaviors that I want, I can put into a hierarchy inside this window for each actor. So the things like timers can be a little bit funny when you start working with like milliseconds and what you want to pop out quickly. But for the most part, I mean, it's drag and drop. It's almost like building a website with Wix versus coding it in Dreamweaver. So there you can see kind of what happens just with an automatic animation playing on a loop. Go back. And so this last one is kind of like my way of faking 3D inside Gamesalad, because I really enjoyed making 3D animations and elements. I always want to incorporate them if I can, because they're visually pleasing. And so currently an actual 3D object is not possible in Gamesalad, but I'm hoping that in the future that will be implemented in some way, shape, or form. So we fake it. And my demo right here is just a shoulder demo. This is actually live on my website now. So if you want to play with it, you can go in and check it out. This is how we used it for building an HTML5 widget. And then I could export it to anything I wanted. So if I wanted this to be a mobile app, it could be a mobile app. If I wanted it to be an HTML5, it could. So that's what this was. And I went into Cinema 4D, rendered out all of my images that I wanted first, and I kind of knew it ahead that I was going to have some buttons that I wanted to drop in. So this is just kind of a basic example of something that maybe you can think of doing with Gamesalad. And then I also did some highlighted ones. Oop. And so these are all buttons. And this is, so none of this is actually 3D. It's just all 2D images. And so for that file, if we go back here, I have the entire 16-minute process. And that's all that took, was 16 minutes. Once you have everything built and your images rendered, it took me 16 minutes to build that little demo, which then could be turned into a mobile app. So if you don't have developers maybe, and you want to find a way to make a mobile app, this is a great solution for that. If you want to create maybe a custom book with a little bit more interactivity based on like touches or timing, or maybe you want a particle emitter to come out at the end of the book and say, congratulations, you finished. I mean, these are all sorts of different options that you can do in Gamesalad. And so I have the entire project here if you guys want to watch it. The website is lynseyekema.com/jaguware. So it's like software, but jagu, so Jagu ware, /gamesalad.html. So do you guys have any questions? I think we have a minute left on the clock. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. No, you do not. Once it's published, for example, we publish them in the App Store. You do have to have certification and keys and things like that in order to do it officially in the App Store. So for iOS in particular. For Google, we do like the Google Play Store. But if you want it in the arcade, yes, you do still have to be connected to the Gamesalad program in order for it to be in the arcade. But we don't really release them in the arcade. I mean, ours are specific to the university, so we actually put them out on the App Store for free. So if any of these that you've seen today, you like, you can actually go to our app store and download anything for free. Oh, sure, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
You output to HTML versus iOS, are there limitations for platforms, or is everything the same?
When we output from HTML to iOS?
Yeah, like if you make an iOS native app versus HTML, do you run into any kind of limitations?
Sure. So initially, when we first started using this program, yes. I mean, you would have to create custom images for each size. That's not so much a problem anymore. The new, I think it's Creator 2.0 in Gamesalad, it actually resizes and adjusts all those for us. So typically when we have, there are a little bit of variations. So for example, when I go into using Gamesalad, I'm sitting down and I'm saying, I know I want to export for this. I know I want to export for that. Some of the really heavy interactivity might not translate in the HTML5. So you have to test and play with it and see what is and is not possible. But it has a great user base, and they have a lot of templates out there. So if there's something that you want to try and you don't know how to do it, I mean, it's always great to start with that template. They also have a huge forum. So most of the time, somebody's tried to do what you're attempting, and there's solutions out there.
You mentioned the lack of full 3D support. Is there anything else that you found that you can't do in this that you can do in traditional gaming engines, Unity?
Like Unity? It gets to be, some of the tips that I put in here, it gets to be very intensive the more images you upload, obviously. So Unity is nice because it's that 3D environment. So when we work with mobile apps and things like that, we put the skeleton in that environment, and it's most of the time it's the videos that are download intensive for our users. That's what takes the longest time. But for Gamesalad, it's because it's all pictures, right? So when you break it down in HTML5 export out of Gamesalad, it will be just kind of like what you would need to create a custom widget. So your info plist file, your images in one folder, your JavaScript, your CSS, all of that. It's just, this is masking it. So you're building it, but it's kind of creating that package for you. So it's the biggest limitation would be just, if you go wild and say, I want to do a 360 rotation of the full skeleton, that's a lot of pictures. So it's just kind of, you got to be smart about what you're choosing to put in there. Any more questions? Cool. Thank you.